Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. Now, as you can see from the title and topic and thumbnail of today's video, today we're going to be talking about Greg Neyman, the old Earth creationist again. And in this particular video, we're going to be responding to this article that he put out on March 4th, 2013, titled, "Is Young Earth Creationism a Cult?" Now, I actually made a video response to this article in my original YouTube channel back in 2017. Unfortunately, that channel and that video no longer exists, so I decided, you know what, let's remake this video with all of my superior recording technology and my improved commentary skills. So we're gonna go back to the well and draw fresh water, as they say. Now, I'm aware that my Greg Neyman videos don't exactly get me many views, if any at all, especially on YouTube, but Greg Neyman is an old Earth creationist who's literally made the focus of his ministry refuting people like me and attacking young Earth creationism. And unfortunately for Greg Neyman, not only is he really bad at attacking young Earth creationism, but he reveals a lot of things about old Earth creationism that I don't think he ever intended to reveal. And so that's why I make video responses to his articles from 8 to 10 years ago, even if those responses don't get me many views. I'm doing this out of principle. Anyway, let's read the article. Let's read the opening paragraph. In my 10 years of examining young Earth creationists on this website, I have generally resisted using the term cult when referring to young Earth creationists. My resistance to the use of this term, however, does not mean that I totally reject the idea of referring to young Earth creationism as a cult. I do believe that people who adhere to young Earth creationism do in fact demonstrate many traits found in cults, and the leaders of the young Earth movement, such as Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis, use the same tactics used by cult leaders in order to keep young Earth followers in line with young Earth teaching. Now, right off the bat, I will say, in response to Greg, that while he is wrong about young Earth creationism, the concept being a cult, there are definitely cults of personality within the young Earth creationism movement. The most notable ones being the Ken Ham cult of personality at AIG and the Kent Hovind cult of personality at Dinosaur Adventureland. Those cults of personality are portrayed as representing the entirety of the young Earth creationism movement, so there's a temptation by others to think that young Earth creationism itself must be a cult if the top people in the movement are cults of personality who have their own little cults around them. Let's continue reading, though. What exactly is a cult? If you look up cult on Wikipedia, it is a negative term for a religious movement or other group whose beliefs or practices are considered abnormal or bizarre by the larger society. How does this tie into young Earth creationism? Our society today accepts that the Earth is billions of years old, so our society would consider those who believe in a young Earth to be abnormal. Society views young Earth creationists as rejecting modern scientific findings in favor of a theory that has no scientific proof. If we stick with this simple definition, then young Earth creationism easily qualifies as a cult. So in other words, according to Greg Neyman, a cult is a movement whose beliefs are considered abnormal or bizarre by society. So in other words, the majority opinion of society determines whether or not something is abnormal or bizarre. In other words, if young Earth creationism contradicts what the majority of people and the scientific and academic community say about the age of the Earth and universe, well then that's abnormal and bizarre, and we can't accept it. You guys are a cult. So in other words, what man says is a higher authority than what God says, according to Greg Neyman, because Greg Neyman allows society, not the Bible, to define whether or not young Earth creationism is an abnormal or bizarre belief. And the reason why Greg Neyman and other old Earth creationists are like this is because they literally view the majority opinion of the scientific and academic community as a higher authority than the Bible. Proof of this is found on page 327 of Perry Marshall's 2015 book, Evolution 2.0, where we read the following. Modern science speaks much more definitively about the age of the Earth than the Bible does, so it is perfectly legitimate to allow science to settle this question. So, according to Perry Marshall, and according to the actions of all old Earth creationist authority figures, the majority opinion of the scientific and academic community is a higher authority than the Bible on origins. Therefore, we should allow them to tell us how origins really went and not go with what the Bible says. And because the majority of lay people also believe in billions of years and Big Bang cosmology and evolution, well, they would consider young Earth creationism to be abnormal or bizarre. And therefore, this is how we can justify calling young Earth creationism a cult. Also notice in this paragraph we read that it says that society views young Earth creationists as rejecting modern scientific findings in favor of a theory that has no scientific proof. Yeah, sure. There's no scientific proof whatsoever of young Earth creationism. Just don't look at the decay rate of Earth's magnetic field, like I did in my video. The decay rate of Earth's magnetic field supports young Earth creationism. Don't look at soft tissue inside non-fossilized dinosaur bones, like I did in my video. Soft tissue in Triceratops bone proves that evolution is false. And certainly don't look at the fossil record, like I did in my video. Evolutionists admit that the fossil record supports young Earth creationism. Sure, as long as you ignore things like the decay rate of Earth's magnetic field, soft tissues in non-fossilized dinosaur bones, and the fossil record, sure, there's no scientific evidence supporting young Earth creationism. None at all. Right. Sure, buddy, whatever you say. But when we continue reading the article, we see Greg Neyman say something very interesting. Of course, there is more to a cult than just beliefs. Cults can be characterized into different groups based on their beliefs. Just to name a few, there are religious cults, doomsday cults, fearing the end of the world, political cults, let's not get into that one, and destructive cults who physically injure or kill members of their own group or outsiders. While young Earth creationists fit the general definition of a cult, they are neither doomsday, political, or destructive, unless you count the fact that I've received threats from young Earth creationists in the past. If they are to be considered a cult, they are simply a religious cult who do not pose a threat to anyone. Now, notice how at the end there, Greg said that young Earth creationism is a religious cult that does not pose a threat to anyone. We're going to see later on in the video that he's going to completely contradict himself on this point. But let's continue reading the article. How does one become a cult member? The psychological aspects of why someone joins a cult has been studied in depth. The most often quoted study was done in the 1960s by a sociologist, John Laughlin. He noted that the efforts of the cult members to win new converts were ineffective and that most of the people who joined did so because of personal relationships with other members, often family members. This sounds a lot like young Earth creationists. They are mostly ineffective in evangelizing society in general due to society's acceptance of modern science. And this paragraph is definitely not true in relation to me. I didn't have family members or friends who were young Earth creationists prior to me becoming a young Earth creationist in 2014. I was not really influenced by young Earth creationist ministries whatsoever. As a matter of fact, prior to the Ken Ham Bill Nye debate in 2014, I had never looked at a young Earth creationism ministry before. It was only after that debate in 2014 that I actually started doing that. But prior to that, I had never, ever been influenced by any young Earth creationist ministries or young Earth creationists in my personal circles, in my family relationships, or anything like that. I literally became a young Earth creationist because I saw young Earth creationism websites like AIG presenting an irrefutable biblical argument supporting the teaching of a 6,000-year-old Earth and universe. I checked out their arguments, made sure they weren't taking verses out of context, and I realized that they were accurately quoting and representing what the Bible said regarding the age of the earth and universe. And that's how I became a young earth creationist. I had no personal relationships with any young earth creationist prior to me becoming a young earth creationist. So this paragraph of Greg's that he wrote definitely doesn't apply to people like me. But let's continue reading. Where does young earth creationism get their converts? Looking at young earth creationism websites, they are full of articles on how important it is to teach children to believe in a young earth. They know that the only way they can survive in the future is if they indoctrinate children while they are young. This is particularly effective as young children during their formative years are much more easily trained, indoctrinated, brainwashed. So according to Greg Neyman, young earth creationists teaching their children young earth creationism is bad, and they're just indoctrinating their children. They're brainwashing their children, and this is bad because young children are just they don't have the cognitive abilities to challenge what they're being told, and basically during their formative years they can be taught all kinds of things that you shouldn't be teaching them. Well, if Greg Neyman is going to condemn young earth creationists for teaching their children the ways of the Lord and young earth creationism, Greg Neyman should be condemning evolutionists for forcing evolution, billions of years, and Big Bang cosmology down the throats of those same children in school. Here, I would like to direct you to a 2016 article by The Guardian titled, Evolution Makes Scientific Sense, So Why Do Many People Reject It? Child psychology studies have identified a natural human bias towards the theory of intelligent design and pose a solution. Teach evolution earlier. It is in the second paragraph of this article that we see them say the following. It is critical that the voting public have a clear understanding of evolution. Adaptation by natural selection, the primary mechanism of evolution, underpins a raft of current social concerns such as antibiotic resistance, the impact of climate change, and the relationship between genes and environment. So why, despite formal scientific education, does intelligent design remain so intuitively plausible and evolution so intuitively opaque, and what can we do about it? So what The Guardian is acknowledging here in the beginning of this article is that intelligent design, i.e. belief in God and ultimately creationism, is intuitive and plausible to people from birth. And evolution, atheism, billions of years, Big Bang cosmology is intuitively opaque to people from birth. It's not something people naturally believe in out of the womb. It's something they have to be indoctrinated into. And basically what the article goes on to say is that when people look out at creation, they look around in the reality that surrounds us, they intuitively understand that everything was designed by a designer of some kind. That's what you naturally believe when you look around at reality and you haven't been indoctrinated into evolution, billions of years, and Big Bang cosmology. So, what was the Guardian's solution to overcoming this problem? So, how do we override such widespread and tenacious cognitive biases? Deb Kellerman and colleagues at Boston University recently published a promising child-friendly intervention, illustrated storybooks about natural selection. When asked about how a feature changes in a species, the majority of children below 10 years of age will call on a teleological explanation. The giraffe has a long neck so that it can reach the higher leaves. Having established this, Kellerman presented 5 to 8-year-olds with storybooks about a made-up animal, Pilosis. Over the course of the story, the children learn that some Pilosis have long, thin trunks, while others have short, thick trunks, and that all Pilosis eat bugs. The weather changes and the bugs move underground. Those Pilosis with long, thin trunks are still able to reach the bugs, but those of short, thick trunks are not, and they die. Only those Pilosis with long, thick trunks survive and have babies who also have long, thin trunks. So, according to The Guardian, the way that we overcome people's belief in intelligent design and creationism that they have intuitively from birth is, well, we'll just start teaching 5 to 8-year-olds illustrated storybooks that teach them evolution, billions of years, Big Bang cosmology, and all the mechanisms that are part of those three things. So, if Greg Neyman is going to condemn young Earth creationists for teaching their children about young Earth creationism, then he should be equally condemning of evolutionists who literally teach those same children about evolution, billions of years, and Big Bang cosmology. If it's wrong for young Earth creationists to do it, it should be wrong for atheists and evolutionists to do the same thing to those same children. And yet, I somehow imagine that Greg Neyman is going to give evolutionists and atheists and older creationists a free pass on this issue. But let's continue reading the article. Young Earth creationism websites also present articles with testimonies from adults who convert to Young Earth creationism, such as this example from last week. If you look at their past, before they became a firm believer in Young Earth creationism, there was usually some type of Young Earth influence in their life, so that later on in life, when they are evangelized by a Young Earth creationist or are bombarded by Young Earth propaganda, they respond because the seeds for Young Earth creationism were already planted years prior to this time. As a general rule, modern scientists and lay people who accept that the Earth is billions of years old only very rarely convert to young Earth creationism belief. So, according to Greg, people like me who converted to young Earth creationism as adults, not only are we the rare type, but the reason why we did it is because we had some kind of young Earth influence early on in our lives that basically took root and were in us, so that by the time we were exposed to young Earth creationism, we were more likely to convert. And in my case, not true. Not true. The reason why I converted to young Earth creationism is because I, for pretty much my whole life, have always been the kind of person who will believe that the Bible teaches something if you can show me in the Bible that the Bible teaches something when it's read in a straightforward and contextual manner and you don't reinterpret it in light of anything else. I have always been that way, so in 2014, when I finally came across the biblical arguments that young Earth creationists make and I saw that they checked out, that's why I became a young Earth creationist. I didn't become a young Earth creationist because I knew young Earth creationists prior to that. I didn't become a young Earth creationist because I knew some young Earth creationist apologists or young Earth creationist lay people in my life who were telling me all about this. No, prior to 2014 and the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate, I was saturated and surrounded by old Earth creationists and old Earth creationist people. I was not part of the young Earth community in any way, and I actually looked down at the few young Earth creationists I came across prior to my conversion to young Earth creationism. But now we're going to get into the fun part of this article. What about cult tactics? On the homepage of this website is a link to a video series by a retired police detective who had training in cult issues. He lists 5 cult tactics that are commonly used by cults, which he also sees in young Earth ministries. 1. Convince followers that everyone else is wrong. 2. Misrepresent God's word and change what the Bible really means. 3. Mix in just enough truth to make the lies believable. 4. Other teachings present a danger to the religion or society as a whole. 5. Warn followers to never listen to other doctrines or they will be deceived. So, according to Greg Neyman, these 5 tactics are evidence that young Earth creationism is a cult. Well, there's a little problem with Greg Neyman presenting these 5 points as evidence of a cult and the tactics they use. These tactics actually prove that Jesus and the biblical worldview is a cult, because Jesus and the Bible convinces his and its adherents that everyone else is wrong. I mean, Jesus literally said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is no other way to the Father but through me. So in other words, according to Jesus, everyone else is wrong. Jesus and the Bible also teach that other teachings that contradict theirs present a danger to the religion or society as a whole. And Jesus and the Bible warn their adherents to never listen to other doctrines or they will be deceived. So technically, Jesus and the Bible have characteristics, tactics of a cult. So by that definition, you could say that Jesus and the biblical worldview is a cult. But what's even more embarrassing about these 5 tactics that define what a cult is that Greg Neyman gave us is that if you apply them to himself and Old Earth creationism, they fit the definition too. Old Earth creationism convinces its adherents that everyone else is wrong. The young Earth creationists are wrong, the atheistic evolutionists are wrong, and in some cases, Old Earth creationists will tell you that the theistic evolutionists are wrong. So, Old Earth creationism follows tactic number 1. And as I've documented on my channel many times, Old Earth creationism and its apologists misrepresent God's words and change what the Bible really means in order to justify their belief. And in order to do that, they do point number 3, mix in just enough truth to make their lies believable. And number 4, Old Earth creationism teaches that other teachings, such as young Earth creationism, present a danger to the religion or society as a whole. And number 5, Old Earth creationism warns followers to never listen to other doctrines or they will be deceived. What Old Earth creationists typically do to make this happen is they'll say, well, young versus Old Earth creationism, it's not really an important issue. It's really just a side issue, a discussion among young and among Christians. And so we shouldn't talk about this publicly, and we should deal with this in-house, and we shouldn't talk about these things in front of the non-believing world. But they never actually do have these discussions. They always pull out this tactic anytime someone tries to make the discussion take place. And Old Earth creationism and its apologists always warn you that basically, if you accept young Earth creationism, you'll be deceived about what the Bible really teaches and about what science teaches, and that this is dangerous to your soul, and you can cause people to turn away from the biblical worldview. So technically, Old Earth creationism itself uses the 5 cult tactics that Greg used in order to justify and maintain its existence, especially numbers 1 through 4. So, Greg Neyman, in his attempt to prove that young Earth creationism is a cult, he actually successfully proved that Old Earth creationism is a cult. Congratulations, Greg Neyman. I know you didn't set out to do it, but you successfully proved that Old Earth creationism is a cult in a way that young Earth creationists never could. So, congratulations. But let's keep reading, though. Can you see these 5 tactics when you think about young Earth creationists? If you have ever argued with a young Earth creationist, you know that she is convinced that you are wrong and that your old Earth views present a danger to the Christian religion. Well, the Bible teaches a 6,000-year-old earth and universe when it's read in a straightforward contextual manner, and we've seen old Earth creationists start rejecting other things that the Bible teaches after they reject what it says on origins, so it actually is a danger to the Christian religion. How many articles have you seen on young Earth sites warning followers of the dangers of millions of years or the dangers of evolution? Too many to count. Have you ever been successful at getting a young Earth creationist to listen to your explanation about an old Earth and have them give it a serious thought? Sure, it's happened, but not often. Most young Earth creationists are trained to ignore any doctrine contrary to a young Earth, and they are very good at it. When you present them with solid scientific evidence, do they accept it? Usually not. They are impervious to scientific truth. It rolls off them like water off a duck. So, apparently, according to Greg, we just ignore scientific evidence in order to justify our worldview, and yet when you look at evolutionists and atheists, they literally admit that they will throw out all observable evidence and reality in order to justify their beliefs. And it really is that bad, because back in 1999, Scott C. Todd said in Nature magazine that even if all the evidence proves that intelligent design is true, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not a naturalistic explanation of origins. And Scott C. Todd did say that in the context of reacting to a debate between a young Earth creationist and an evolutionist. So yes, evolutionists literally are willing to throw out all evidence that contradicts their worldview, but the evolutionists, the atheists, and old Earth creationists project that onto us in order to condemn us. So a lot of projection going on here in this particular paragraph. We're going to skip the cult characteristics section because, like I said earlier, there are cults of personality within the young Earth creationism movement. And I do not disagree with Greg about that. I have a problem with those folks as well. Mostly because I've actually been banned from Facebook and MeWe groups on the internet over the last several years for daring to criticize people like Kent Hovind and Ken Ham. In the case of Ken Ham, I pointed out that he denies that young earth creationism is a salvation issue, even though his ministry teaches all of the premises that lead you to that conclusion. And in the case of Kent Hovind, I pointed out that he teaches that repentance is not a part of salvation, which is a complete rank heresy relational to the New Testament. But I've been banned from young earth creationism groups on social media for daring to point that out. So I'm with Greg on there being cults of personality in the young earth creationism movement. So let's read the conclusion section. Do we call young earth creationism a cult? If you look at the loose definition of a cult, young earth creationism fits the description. If you look at the 5 cult tactics used to keep members believing in the cult, young earth creationism leaders are guilty of using all 5 tactics. Well, guess what, Greg? So is old earth creationism and old earth creationists. So this really doesn't mean anything. Old earth creationism and old earth creationists are every bit as cultish as you claim young earth creationists are, based on the 5 tactics you laid out in this article. However, young earth creationists fit some but not all of the characteristics of a cult. I've only listed some of the considerations for cult identification. I'm certain there are more factors to consider. I believe one can call them a cult, but I also recognize that others are uncomfortable doing so, and I respect their hesitation to call young earth creationists a cult. Most of us have young earth creationist friends, so calling them cult members may be a little uncomfortable. Well, if you're talking to a young earth creationist who's as knowledgeable and logical and rational as I am, and you want to present the arguments you made in this article, yeah, you may want to avoid calling us cult members or adherents to a cult, because we will turn your own words right on you and prove that you are part of a cult based on the definition of a cult that you provide. Even if we consider them a cult, we must not go around calling young earth creationists cultists. If we want to reach them with the truth, we don't want to immediately turn them off and make them mad. I believe the issue of reaching a young earth creationist and breaking him free of the mind control techniques of young earth ministries needs to be studied in depth. One could say, why bother? We are both Christians, so let each other be. The reason this is so important, I believe, is because of the great harm that young earth creationism is doing to the church. Whoa, time out. So according to Greg Neyman, he says that young earth creationism is doing great harm to the church. But at the beginning of the article, he said that young earth creationism was a religious cult that doesn't pose a threat to anyone. And yet apparently we pose a great threat to the church. In other words, young earth creationism is a threat to the religion that Greg is an adherent to. Greg Neyman is literally using cult tactic number 4 in order to justify claiming that young earth creationism is a cult that we shouldn't accept. So Greg Neyman literally just used cult tactic number 4 to condemn young earth creationism, further cementing my theory that old earth creationism is a cult based off of the cult tactics that Greg listed earlier in the article. But let's continue reading. Think back to the definition at the top of the page, a group whose beliefs or practices are considered abnormal or bizarre by the larger society. Do we want the church to be considered by our society to be abnormal? I certainly don't. Young earth creationists are making a concerted effort to push their beliefs upon the church, and it is causing great harm to the church. I believe we must fight their efforts for the survival of the church. So, after Greg Neyman says that other teachings present a danger to the religion or society as a whole is a tactic that cults use in order to maintain their existence and keep their adherents inside the cult, he then employs cult tactic number 4 against young earth creationism by claiming that young earth creationism is a threat to the church. And that's why we must fight against young earth creationism. So not only is Greg Neyman using cult tactic number 4 to justify his old earth creationism beliefs and to reject young earth creationism, but he is contradicting what he said earlier in the article when he claimed that young earth creationism was a religious cult that posed a threat to nobody. And notice once again, he says society is who gets to be the arbiter of whether or not young earth creationism is abnormal or not. Society at large is the arbiter of whether or not something is true or not. So in other words, in order to please man, we need to reject young earth creationism, and we need to integrate billions of years evolution and Big Bang cosmology into the biblical worldview and call it old earth creationism and claim that the Bible has always taught this. That's what Greg and all old earth creationist apologists are really doing here. But as you can see in this article, Greg Neyman, in his desperate attempt to prove that young earth creationism was a cult, he not only proved that Jesus and the biblical worldview is technically a cult, but he also definitively proved that old earth creationism is a cult. And he definitively proved this by using cult tactic number 4 in the last paragraph of his article. So yes, let it be known, old earth creationism is a cult. And we just have to turn to articles like this by old earth creationist apologists like Greg Neyman to prove that old earth creationism is a cult. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked what you saw and you want to help me go from being a part-time to a full-time content creator, then I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button, check out my other videos, and leave your likes and comments down below. It doesn't matter whether you're seeing me on YouTube or Joshu TV or YouTube or NewTube or BitChute, the concept applies to them all equally. And if you'd like to follow me on my various social media accounts, I would encourage you to check out my Tap My Bio profile, where I have links to all of the social media sites that I have accounts on. If you'd like to help me preserve freedom of speech on the internet, there are 2 ways you can do this. You can join and use my website Creation Social, which is an open source alt-tech alternative to Facebook and Gab. Lots of great conversations happen here. You have true freedom of speech with very minimal drama, which I think is the best of both worlds. And if you like using Facebook at all, then you should definitely use Creation Social. If you want to help me create a video sharing site of my own, I would encourage you to donate to the Quarter Project. Quarter is an open source alt-tech alternative to YouTube that I am currently working on raising funds for. It's going to be a site that is very feature-rich and functional, and it will have pretty much all the features you'd ever want in a video sharing site, and all of the freedom of speech that you would want as well. So you can contribute to the Quarter Project either through my GiveSendGo campaign, which you can see here on screen, or you can donate to the Quarter account on Flattr, where you can do one-time or monthly tips. And everything you do as far as Flattr donations go or GiveSendGo campaign goes will go towards the Quarter Project. And if you'd like to help fund TTOR or the Creation Social and or Quarter projects, then you can purchase products from my Teespring store, where we have TTOR merch, we have Creation Social merch, and we have Quarter merch. And you'll find the link for that in the description box below as well. You can also help fund me by buying and reading my books. There's another Inconvenient Truth, What Secular America Hates, and there's another Inconvenient Truth too, Defending Young Earth Creationism. You can find access to these books on the TTOR website. Thank you for watching, and have an excellent day.